What's up, guys? Welcome back to Jimmy Talks. Before we get into it, get all the annoying YouTube stuff out of the way. Follow me on X, follow me on Rumble in case YouTube nukes me. All right, that's out of the way. We're just going to break down this topic. Most people only understand this kind of stuff in like bits and pieces, or they may know about APAC, but not much else. And by the way, this stuff is not conspiracy theories. You can look up all of this stuff yourself. So without further ado, because I don't want to waste any time, let's start with the most obvious one, and that is politics and lobbying. APAC and a network of similar PACs function as a political gatekeeper. They do not just donate money, they systematically support friends and they destroy their enemies. Any politician, from a new representative to a senior senator who steps out of line and questions U.S. policy towards Israel, faces an immediate and well-funded primary challenge. Their career is threatened not based on their record for their voters, but on their loyalty to a foreign nation. This creates a very strong bipartisan consensus. It doesn't matter if a Republican or a Democrat is in the Oval Office meeting the president. The policy remains the same. The American voter is given a choice on domestic issues to an extent, but on this critical aspect of foreign policy, the choice is merely just an illusion. The system is rigged to produce the same outcome every time. Now, let's move on to the next one, and that's tech and finance, because political control is fragile if the economy and infrastructure are independent. So the next layer, obviously, is tech and finance and how they've gotten into it. Israeli companies are deeply embedded in America's critical infrastructure. Software from firms like Checkpoint and CyberArk is installed into our power grids, our water systems, and our financial networks. In other words, they are deeply embedded into the electrical grid and our water supply systems. This is not a secret. It is actually just public knowledge if you Google any of these companies I'm showing you on the screen. These systems have remote access capabilities for maintenance, but the obvious and frankly logical concern is that these access points could be used as backdoors or kill switches. We worry about Chinese tech in our telecom grid for the exact same reason, and rightfully so, but this vulnerability is often dismissed or just outright ignored when it comes to Israel. Control over the physical workings of a nation is a very strong form of power. Now, next, we're moving on to intelligence agencies in the intelligence world. The public story is one of a special relationship and intelligence sharing, but the history tells a much different story. We have an example here of Jonathan Pollard. He was a rare public glimpse into a much larger reality, which is aggressive Israeli espionage against its chief benefactor, the United States. Jonathan Pollard, an American Navy intelligence analyst, smuggled vast amounts of top-secret data to Israel, and he was being paid for it. This was not a lone wolf. This has happened numerous times, and it was a state-sponsored operation by Israel. This pattern of using the alliance as cover for espionage continues, with the goal of stealing American military technology, which Israel then often repackages and sells on the global market. There's also a documented history of what can only be described as false flag operations. The attack on the USS Liberty in 1967, where Israeli forces knowingly attacked a U.S. intelligence ship because they were spying on Israel and seeing what they were doing, killed 34 American sailors, and it was an attempt to blame Egypt and drag the U.S. into a war so that we would fight for them. This is the ultimate manipulation here, which is manufacturing a pretext for war that serves a foreign interest, and the same thing happened with 9/11. Next, let's move on to the culture war, because there is also a cultural and informational battlefield. This is where the strategy becomes truly long-term. If you can shape what people think, you don't need to force them to think a certain way. A simple look at the leadership of major media companies, Hollywood studios, and top universities reveals a striking lack of diversity in a very specific sense. There is an overwhelming representation of individuals with strong affiliations and loyalty to Israel in these key decision-making roles. These are not just individuals, it is a systemic bias. The narrative on the Middle East is carefully managed. Criticism of Israel is framed as unacceptable, and it is simply just smeared as anti-Semitism. But it goes far beyond news coverage. Now, let's get into psychological operations. These same channels in the media are used to promote cultural trends that serve a broader strategic purpose. The overwhelming promotion of hypersexualized content, pornography, and radical gender ideology has a corrosive effect on the society of America, particularly the traditional Western family structure. A society that is hyper-individualistic, morally confused, and focused on identity politics is a society that cannot muster a coherent national will. This is a society that is easy to manage and control. At the same time, ideologies like critical race theory are promoted to instill a sense of guilt and self-hatred in the historic American majority. The people who are taught that their history is purely one of evil and that their very existence is problematic will not have the confidence to defend their own borders, their own culture, or their own national interest. They will passively accept policies like mass immigration that lead to their own demographic and cultural replacement. This is psychological warfare, and it's very effective. Now, finally, we have the ultimate enforcement mechanism, which is blackmail. The Jeffrey Epstein operation was not merely about a rich pedophile. This was a very sophisticated intelligence asset that was being deployed by Mossad. The pattern of his contacts, his association with Ghislaine Maxwell, which was the daughter of known Mossad agent Robert Maxwell, and the specific targeting of powerful individuals like politicians, British royalty, billionaires, and military leaders points to a single purpose, which is compromising them. The goal was to gather blackmail material to ensure the lifelong compliance of the Western elite. If campaign donations and media support aren't enough to keep a politician in line, the threat of a sex tape involving a minor certainly will be. This is the darkest layer of control, and it makes sure that even those who might have a crisis of conscience are trapped. Now, for part 2 of this video, let's move on to the Samson option, which is the ultimate failsafe for Israel. All of these systems of control are designed to make the United States a compliant and useful protectorate. But what if the system fails? What if, despite all of this, an American leader or a populist movement arises that is truly committed to putting America first, even if it means confronting this foreign influence? This is where the Samson option comes in. The term refers to the biblical figure known as Samson, who brought the temple of the Philistines down upon himself and his enemies. In strategic terms, it is the doctrine that if Israel is ever faced with an existential threat that it cannot defeat conventionally, it will take the entire region and potentially the world down with it using its arsenal of nuclear weapons. The brilliance of this control network that I just described has effectively made the United States a part of that equation. By embedding itself so deeply into America's financial system, its intelligence agencies, its critical infrastructure like the electrical grid, Israel has made itself supposedly too big to fail. Any serious attempt by an American government to break free would be portrayed not as a recalibration of foreign policy, but as an existential threat to Israel itself. The logic here is quite simple. A U.S. president who decides to cut off all aid, impose sanctions, or truly pressure Israel to comply with international law would be crossing a red line. In response, the levers of control inside America would be activated. The media would launch an unprecedented smear campaign, labeling the president an anti-Semite and a threat to world peace. The political establishment and both parties would revolt. Economic pressure from Wall Street would also be applied. And if all of that failed, the more direct tools could be used, like financial chaos triggered through backdoors in our systems, or even the threat of triggering a wider war that the U.S. would be forced to enter. In this scenario, the U.S. is not just an ally, it is a hostage. The Samson option is no longer just about nuking one of their neighboring and warring Muslim countries. It's about having the capability to destabilize and potentially cripple the United States itself, if it ever ceases to be a loyal protector. This is the ultimate deterrent against American independence, and makes the cost of reclaiming sovereignty unacceptably high. Now, for part 3 of this video, you may be asking yourself, why? Or you may just be wondering why. And I had that same question myself, so let's go over it. Why would a nation undertake such a vast, complex, and risky project? The motive is not some Disney movie villain twirling his mustache or anything like that. This is just a calculated and, from their perspective, perfectly logical strategy from a very specific historical experience. The driving force, given their historical persecution, is honestly understandable when it comes to their existential insecurity. For centuries, Jewish communities in Europe lived as a minority, often facing pogroms, discrimination, and violence. They were kicked out of 109 countries. This history created a worldview for them. The Gentile world is fundamentally and eternally anti-Semitic. Safety can never be guaranteed by the goodwill of others. It has to be engineered through absolute control. So the goal, therefore, is to create a world where their security is permanently guaranteed. This is achieved by structuring global power in a specific way. The ideal world is one that has two sides to it. Now, the first side is called the fortress. This is the ever so powerful Israel, which is territorially expansive, and we can see this with their plans of Greater Israel, which is, again, not a conspiracy. This is actually doctrine, which is militarily dominant and possessing a nuclear arsenal. This is the homeland and it's the seat of their power. Now, the next side, or the other side of the clipped coin, is the protectorate. This is the rest of the Western world, and it's primarily the United States, but it's also Europe. The ideal protectorate is not a rival. It is just a controlled entity, which is what we see now with the United States. It is demographically diluted and culturally degraded, so it lacks a strong, cohesive national identity. It is financially and technologically dependent. Its political class is compromised. Its military serves as a mercenary force for Israel's interests. The protectorate provides money, weapons, and diplomatic cover, while being too internally weak and divided to ever become a threat. This is the core of their strategy, which is safety is not achieved by making the Gentile world friendly, but by making it harmless. A strong, confident, morally coherent, and demographically stable United States is a very big threat. But a weak, divided, guilt-ridden, and multi-ethnic conglomerate whose elites are bought or blackmailed is a safe and useful tool. This explains the fervent promotion of policies that seem to harm the West. Mass immigration, cultural Marxism, hyper-individualism, all of these policies are not just accidental. They are weapons in a Cold War that is aimed at dismantling the United States' ability to resist. This is the ultimate application of the divide and conquer principle. By keeping Americans fighting among themselves about race, gender, and politics, they ensure we never unite to see the real manipulation happening behind the curtain. So that is pretty much the end of this video. But to wrap it all up, we are witnessing not just something that's called a simple alliance as they like to sell to us, but a sophisticated and very terrifyingly effective form of subjugation. A foreign nation has, through a long-term strategy, achieved a very strong degree of control over the world's sole superpower. They control our politics, our infrastructure, our media, our culture, and our elite. They hold a nuclear and strategic dagger to our throat in the form of the Samson option. And they do it all because, in their historical perspective, it's perfectly rational. And finally, after 2,000 years of persecution, they want to just take over the world and make the rest of us powerless. The question is no longer if this is happening, but what, if anything, can be done about it. And me personally, I foresee change coming in the future, and this change will benefit the West. Many Zoomers and also just people in general are waking up to this stuff. All right, guys, that's all for me today. God bless you and your families. America first and only. Jimmy Talks out.